Russian aviation is suffering losses again. This time an Mi-8 helicopter has crashed. The GUR calculated how many missiles Russia has stored. Fresh data from our intelligence. Russians are fleeing from Red Square. A Ukrainian drone dispersed the parade rehearsal. The height of cynicism from the Kremlin. A few hours ago they hit a kindergarten with drones. Rescuers are still clearing the rubble. Germany is preparing for a direct war with Russia. Has Europe finally made up its mind? The US is providing equipment for our aerial bombs. The IFU is upgrading over 1,500 shells. And a new luxury resort for Russians. Young people are flocking to Minsk to live like humans for a few days. Are you interested yet? Then give us a like right now and we'll begin. My name is Vladimir Karaban. This is the news for today. Let's go! Russia has lost another Mi-8. The information was confirmed in the Russian Z community. Propagandist Ilya Tumanov, closely linked to the Russian aerospace forces, confirmed the loss and posted it on social media. There is no official information on the incident or its details yet. They will strike further and more accurately. The US State Department approved the potential sale of over 1,500 JDAM guided bomb kits to Ukraine. The total value of the deal is nearly $400 million. The package also includes a variety of fuses, a range of spare parts, comprehensive repair services, specialized software, and other related equipment. According to the State Department, the sale of this weaponry is expected to help achieve important foreign policy objectives as well as support US national security goals. These measures are intended to strengthen alliances and promote stability in key regions. An interesting detail, news of the potential sale of kits that turn regular bombs into precision weapons emerged after a call between Marco Rubio and Lavrov. Do you think it's a coincidence? The Russian Foreign Ministry reported that the parties discussed the international agenda. However, the diplomats did not disclose any details. Meanwhile, the United Arab Emirates will invest in Ukrainian drone production, Bloomberg reports, citing its own sources. This specifically concerns the financing of the Ukrainian unmanned system sector. The publication did not specify which particular project was involved, but Abu Dhabi had previously considered buying a 30% stake in Firepoint, a company known for its advanced long-range weapons and strike drones. The FSB is on fire. 6 Ukrainian UAVs struck the so-called Federal Security Service building in Armyansk just before midnight yesterday. According to OSINT social media channels, there are also many military personnel and occupiers in the surrounding houses linked to Russian intelligence. Preliminary reports after the strike indicate 5 fatalities and a dozen wounded. Simultaneously with the strike on Armyansk, which the occupiers are trying to hide by any means, there was another one on Jankoy. A representative of the occupation authorities confirmed the success of the attack on social media, though without providing any details. 70% of Russian territory is now within reach of Ukrainian drones, Bloomberg also reports. And what's telling is that the more actively Ukrainian drones bring the war back to the aggressor's own territory, the more people there suddenly become political experts and want the war to end. Take, for example, a recent poll from Yekaterinburg. In April, the city was attacked by a drone for the first time.
For a very long time now, I've just wanted all of this to end.
Well, a sense of horror.
The heart of Russia, and it's reached us too.
Before, the threat seemed unreachable and far away, but now it's become scary. Yes, now it's a reality. And well, what if it gets even worse? It's become very frightening.
It's just bad. Of course, all of this needs to end.
But on what terms?
The main thing is peace. A peaceful sky overhead, yes.
Meanwhile, the armed forces of Ukraine are preparing for the parade on Red Square and are currently zeroing in while continuing to masterfully destroy infrastructure serving the Russian army. We've compiled the most spectacular target hits.
You can watch 3 things forever: the flickering of fire, the flowing water, and a flamingo missile as it takes off. Ukrainian missiles struck the VNI Progress plant at a distance of more than 1,000 kilometers from the border. The VNIR Progress plant is of strategic importance to the Russian Federation, as it produces a vast number of components for the missiles Putin uses to strike Ukrainian cities.
Operators of the first separate center, in cooperation with the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, missile forces, and other components of the security and defense forces, launched a combined strike on the VNIR Progress enterprise in the city of Cheboksary. The facility produces GNSS receivers and antennas for GLONASS, GPS, and Galileo systems, including Cometa navigation modules resistant to electronic warfare. These modules are used in Kalibr, KH-69, Iskander-M, and S-8000 Banderol missiles, as well as in Shahed-type drones, Orlan 10, and 4-post. Furthermore, Cometa is integrated into the planning and correction modules which transform aerial bombs into guided munitions. GUR, Ministry of Defense.
It looks like the Flamingo missile is now fully operational with the AFU, and such strikes will become systematic.
The Flamingo missile, also known as the FP5. It's a good missile, and by all accounts, it has already seriously entered service. And this is a significant element of what I would call a kind of new reality in the war between Russia and Ukraine. And this new reality essentially comes down to the fact that shelling and strikes deep inside the Russian rear across almost the entire European territory, the entire European part of the Russian Federation, are becoming a sort of routine set of circumstances.
Russian authorities reported nearly 300 attack drones shot down across 18 regions of the Russian Federation. Almost the entire European part of Russia was in an uproar. This is how one of the Z bloggers, currently living in the Urals and formerly a fighter in Ukraine with the Storm Z unit, reacted to the AFU's night attacks.
For the first time in my life, as a resident of a city always in the rear, I'm hearing sounds like these. The cops are driving through the city with an announcement. Attention, missile danger. Looks like Putin's special operation isn't so popular anymore.
Even local deputies are dissatisfied with the strikes on Chuvashia, having practically begun to openly criticize Putin and his so-called SMO.
Today's drone strikes on the capital of Chuvashia, on Cheboksary, are a result of politics. Special military operation, our fallen fellow countrymen, that is also politics. Utility rates, that is also politics. Everything that affects us is politics. So I'm telling you, use your heads and really consider carefully what is currently happening in the country.
It's not just about the plant in Cheboksary. Ukrainian forces also managed to strike an oil refinery that's among the 5 largest in Russia. Ukrainian drones paid a visit to the Leningrad region and struck the Karishi oil refinery.
Operators of the first separate center, along with the SSO and SBU in coordination with other defense forces, hit the Karishi oil refinery Kinev in the Leningrad region. The plant's capacity is 20 to 21 million tons of oil per year, making it one of the 3 largest refineries in the aggressor country. The plant is part of the Surgutneftegas structure and specializes in deep oil refining, producing fuel, bitumen, and aromatic hydrocarbons. Kinev is a vital element of Russia's export logistics in the Baltic region. The GUR of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine.
The entire Russian oil structure, including all of its extensive infrastructure, from the initial stages of production all the way through to the final processes of export, is currently under a very serious and significant impact. As they often say in military circles, it is experiencing the direct impact of the enemy, which, as you might expect, also causes, of course, a great deal of irritation and wild, uncontrollable rage in Moscow.
It seems that Putin's fears regarding the May 9th parade are not groundless, and Ukrainian unmanned systems forces could deliver a gift to Red Square on the so-called Victory Day, and not just in Moscow. And it's already obvious that new Ukrainian weapons, specifically Flamingo missiles and systematic strikes, are becoming a serious trump card in Ukraine's hands. Meanwhile, it may soon be even harder for Russians to fight back. Germany is preparing to openly enter the war against Russia. This statement was made by the Russian ambassador in Berlin, Sergei Nechayev. According to the official, Germany is undergoing rapid militarization, preparing for a military confrontation with Moscow. Nechayev also believes that the Bundeswehr is actively increasing funding for military programs as well as private defense companies. Well, the Kremlin apparently thinks that only Russia is allowed to increase weapons production. The EU says no. At the same time, the Russian Federation continues to increase its military stockpiles. The Ukrainian GUR has calculated how many missiles Russia has accumulated so far and what its production capabilities are. So, according to intelligence data, as of mid-April, the Russian Federation had quite large missile stockpiles, including up to 460 calibers, up to 200 Iskander-Ms, up to 230 Zircons, and about 120 K101. According to GUR information, every month Russia is capable of producing up to 70 Kh-101 missiles, up to 60 Iskander-Ms, and up to 25 calibers, as well as about 10 Kinjals. And the armed forces of Ukraine are not happy with this situation. The result is strikes, like the one yesterday on a facility in Cheboksary. Ukrainian flamingos flew over 1,500 kilometers and successfully destroyed a plant involved in rocket building, as well as the occupiers' aviation and navy. Meanwhile, realizing that the noose around Putin's regime is tightening, the bunker dweller is trying his best to slow down this process. Colossal losses at the front are forcing the Kremlin to once again beg Pyongyang for suicide squads to be sent to the front. Will Kim Jong-un help a second time? More on this later in the report.
Thousands dead, tens of thousands sent to the front. And that was only the beginning. North Korea continues to supply Russia with not only weapons but also cannon fodder.
We do not consider ourselves responsible for the loss of life.
As Reuters reports, at the 11th Congress of the Socialist Patriotic League in Pyongyang, Kim Jong-un effectively gave the green light to a new wave of sending youth to war, calling them the vanguard and key force of the regime, from whom he demands a readiness to fight and die.
Pyongyang wants to demonstrate to the whole world that relations with Moscow are taking on a different meaning.
Amid the thunder of torchlight processions, mass rallies, and solemn concerts, the North Korean dictator is shaping not the country's future, but a resource for war, where young men and women from 14 to 30 years old are turned into an instrument of someone else's geopolitics.
North Koreans, Kim Jong-un.
The North Koreans and Kim Jong-un acknowledge their involvement in this war. At the same time, they say that the death of each one, and there can be no other way here. Such is the logic of a death cult. They call the soldiers who died in unknown places for unclear reasons a sacred sacrifice in the battle for their fatherland. Where is this fatherland? No one explains it to anyone. But it is a sacred war. These are sacred sacrifices.
And the ties between the two dictatorial countries are also strengthened by symbolic gestures. On April 26, Kim Jong-un, together with Russian Defense Minister Belousov, opened a memorial in honor of those killed in the so-called special military operation. Solemnly, with speeches, an orchestra, and the right words about heroic deeds and brotherhood. In short, everything is in the style of the RF.
By decree of the President of the Russian Federation, for courage, bravery, and selflessness shown in the performance of military duty, the Order of Courage is awarded to...
Belousov stated that he had agreed with North Korean officials to put military cooperation on a stable, long-term basis and to sign a cooperation plan for the period from 2027 to 2031.
In 2024, the Russian and North Korean dictators signed a treaty on a comprehensive strategic partnership between Russia and the DPRK. The agreement includes a provision for mutual defense. Thus, Moscow and Pyongyang legalized the sending of North Korean soldiers to the war against Ukraine.
This is full support. This is full support for Russia, both political and ideological.
But behind this image of ostentatious unity lies a very specific price. Slightly more than 14,000 North Korean troops were sent to fight alongside the Russian army. More than 6,000 of them were left to rot in a foreign land.
For North Korea, as is the case for, in principle, any army anywhere in the world, it is extremely important to always be thoroughly prepared for the challenges of modern warfare, because the generals are likely still living by the myths of 1949, so to speak.
With every such step, it becomes clear that Putin is not ready for peace. But as they say, forewarned is forearmed. And in case of new challenges, including North Korean units on the front, Ukraine's defense forces are ready to meet them properly with artillery, drones, and high-precision weapons.
Meanwhile, Moscow is officially practically begging for a truce. A fake one, of course, with the sole purpose of holding a parade on May 9th. In reality, however, we see something completely different. A few hours ago, Russia struck a kindergarten in the center of Sumy with drones. This was reported by the city's mayor, Artem Kobzar. A rescue operation is underway at this very moment. They are still clearing the rubble at the scene. Information about casualties is still being clarified. And this is despite the fact that a ceasefire declared by Ukraine took effect at the start of May 6th. President Vladimir Zelensky announced a break in attacks following Russian demands for a truce during the propaganda celebrations in Moscow for May 9th.
A truce, but not on Moscow's terms. While Russia prepares for May 9th, Kyiv makes a move and breaks Putin's script.
Zelensky responded to Putin's proposal for a truce. Kyiv is introducing a regime of silence starting May 6th.
Earlier, Moscow announced a unilateral ceasefire for May 8th and 9th. At the same time, Kyiv emphasizes that Ukraine received no official truce proposals from the Kremlin.
At any moment, we could have expected a corresponding statement from either Lavrov or Zakharova, saying that no official proposal from Putin, I stress this, was ever on the table. The second trap was that if the Ukrainian president agreed to this truce, it would consequently diminish the standing of the Ukrainian president himself.
Because the Ukrainian side cannot reject this proposal, as that is where the third trap lies.
Russia is trying and will take the opportunity to accuse the Ukrainian side of being unable to negotiate. In other words, this will be used as an argument to appeal to the United States.
But meanwhile, Ukraine has seized the initiative.
Zelensky stated that human lives are more important than any Russian parades.
Ukraine's president considers a two-day truce unserious, so he announced a regime of silence and reciprocal measures at the front. Meaning silence, but only if it exists on the other side as well.
The Ukrainian side is currently carrying out what is commonly referred to as a so-called preemptive strike. That is, it shifts the time frame of the truce.
But what's key is that leadership is now in Ukraine's hands, and Russia might just walk into its own trap.
If Russia agrees to the Ukrainian proposals, it means that Ukraine is the one driving the possibility of a ceasefire and, moreover, testing the very nature of that ceasefire. If the Russian Federation does not agree to these terms, then Ukraine, under international law, has every legal right to strike, if it chooses to do so, during the so-called military parade in Moscow.
Thus, Russia has a chance to secure that much desired silence and control on May 9th, but only if they accept Kyiv's conditions.
And then give them a chance to rest. We don't have any days off. We apologize because of Russia, because of their attack. So we give them a day off, and the morning after the 9th, they'll be back to killing us again. We'll see how it goes.
But against this backdrop, threats are also being made. Along with the announcement of a two-day truce, the Russian Ministry of Defense didn't miss the chance to issue a threat.
The Russian Ministry of Defense immediately threatened to strike Kyiv if their parade is disrupted.
Is the bunker man so afraid to come out on May 9th that the Kremlin couldn't find any other words?
The Ukrainian side can hardly be frightened by anything anymore. There have already been Oreshnik strikes, constant attacks using ballistic and cruise missiles.
But it turns out that, unexpectedly, these Russian scare tactics have dealt a blow to Putin's own reputation.
These statements appear to be very clearly a warning to the Ukrainian side not to strike during the military parade. And Russians themselves are asking, so it turns out that little tanks and columns of cadets are more important to the Russian dictator than the bombings of Belgorod and Bryansk. Why weren't there similar threats from the Russian Federation when those strikes were happening? Because of Tuaps.
But that's not the end of it. Another risk factor is emerging. The threat of an Oreshnik launch as Russia closed the airspace over the Kapustin Yar range from May 5th to 8th.
If we're talking about the possibility of using Oreshnik before the parade, then what about the Russian Ministry of Defense's statement that in the event of a Ukrainian strike during the parade, all forces and means of the Russian Federation will be used for a retaliatory strike on Ukrainian territory? At the very least, it's a contradiction.
And now everything depends on Russia. Because Zelensky's recent statement about drones over Moscow could become a reality.
For many years, they haven't been able to afford the presence of weapons at the parade, and Ukrainian drones could also pay a visit to this parade.
Russia was hoping to impose its own truce on specific dates and its own terms, but Kyiv seized the initiative and broke the imposed scenario. And now the choice is up to Russia.
We have changed the paradigm of the war. Now it's no longer Ukrainians who fear possible strikes by the Russian Federation on Ukrainian territory on dates sacred to Russians. Now Russians are checking the calendar, and when they see dates sacred to them, they realize with horror that this could be a reason for a strike on the territory of the Russian Federation.
And in Russia, preparations are in full swing for the main victory mania of the year. In Volgograd, locals have already been warned not to enter areas of unrestrained celebration with strollers, pets, and bags or backpacks. In the Russian Federation, mass internet outages are already beginning, and it's not even May 9th yet. Warnings about communication blocks are being issued thousands of kilometers away from today's front line.
Well, comrades, it's getting scary. I wake up in the morning and my phone is empty. Not a single SMS, not a single message anywhere. Usually you wake up and lie there for half an hour, sorting through what people sent you, what the news is, and so on. But today, zero. So as it turns out, Moscow is now completely cut off from everything around it, with no way in or out.
Businesses are counting their losses and to somehow save the situation are asking customers to prepare cash. Both couriers and taxi drivers are suffering. To earn at least something, they are literally storming fast food restaurants where there is free Wi-Fi. But the most interesting and telling thing, in my opinion, is this video right here. Participants in the night parade rehearsal on Red Square are running away after Sobyanin's report of a UAV attack on Moscow. Russians are fleeing not only from drones and missiles, but also from Putin's turmoil. Belarus has become a new resort where you can live like a human being for at least a couple of days. In the Russian Federation, 2 to 3 day trips to Minsk are gaining massive popularity. Young people say, here you can use social media without fear, eat well, dress in familiar brands, and even get a card from a Belarusian bank to pay for foreign subscriptions. All of this is now impossible in Russia. And that's all I have time to tell you for this hour. But in the next episode, even more news awaits you. In the meantime, be sure to like this video if you haven't already and subscribe to our channel to know even more.